Well, hello everyone. The first reading that we heard at the Easter Vigil was from Genesis chapter 1, the account of creation. Now, Christians disagree. We debate about how we're supposed to read those early chapters of Genesis, whether it's to be taken literally or more as a metaphor. But those debates can easily distract us from what, as Christians, we all agree about those early chapters of Genesis, that God created our world and our whole universe, and that he created it good. If you look at that first chapter of Genesis, every time God creates something, it says God saw it and saw that it was good. And at the end, when everything's completed, it says that God saw all that he had made, and it was very good. But we don't need to look very far in our world today. Indeed, you don't need to read much further in Genesis to see that something's gone wrong, that our world isn't 100% good anymore. In fact, it's quite a bit of a mess. But when things start to go wrong, God doesn't scrap the whole thing. It's a failed experiment, we'll just ditch it. Instead, God still sees through all the mess of our world and of us. He still sees that good that he put there in the beginning. He still longs for the good of creation, for the good of us, because he still loves us. He still loves his creation. And so God sets a plan in action to bring it back to the good. And in the life, death and resurrection of Jesus, God's Son, that action comes into effect. It's like Jesus grabs hold of the steering wheel of creation, throws us into a U-turn, and we start heading back towards the good. God's plan comes into effect, bringing about that day when God will make all things new, when creation will be very good once more. That's not a day when God hits the reset button back to default settings, restores everything back to factory settings as it was in Genesis chapter 1. If you flick to the end of the Bible, it doesn't end in a garden in Eden. It ends in a heavenly city. The Bible calls it the New Jerusalem, with God dwelling amongst his people and us seeing him face to face. Creation restored to the good, but not back as it was in the beginning. This time, it's different. And as Christians, this gives us hope. Hope that the universe isn't subject to the forces of entropy, where things will slowly get worse and worse until eventually it all fizzles out into increasing chaos. Instead, we have a God who wills the good for his creation, who's drawing it back to himself, who's drawing us back to himself, who's working all things towards that day where all things will be made new. And God will look at his creation, and it will be very good. Alleluia, Christ is risen. He is risen indeed. Alleluia.